What up, folks? I'm going high today. I usually go up high like that, or what up, what up, what up? Rob, welcome to the Mikey G podcast experience. This is a wild situation in the sense that what people do not know is that we were hammering some drinks and having a good time. This has got to be like 20 years ago now. Maybe even close to 15 years at least in DC. We knew each other right out of college. We were younger. We were in our 20s. And now you're here.
I'm here. Yeah. Amazing.
It's crazy. Welcome to the show, brother. How you doing?
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much. I'm doing well.
Dude.
Still can put down a couple of pints. You know?
I had to stop the pints like we talked about. Maybe we'll get there, but dude,
only light beer from now.
Right. When things like this happen, I'm firmly convinced these are just micro signs that I'm at the right place in my life. I'm doing the right things for the right reasons. So before we get into the beautiful Mikey G question that I ask every guest, couple updates about myself. Been grinding hard. Working with a handful of founders in the space. I can't reiterate enough. I think one guy that's going to come on, hopefully, I can't reveal his name yet, but I think another part of my fundamental mission on this earth is, one, to bring human beautiful stories like we're about to do here, but then also integrate how much humanity needs to understand how AI is fundamentally going to change this world. And if we don't do it the right way, with grace, with gratitude, and with kindness, things can go awry quickly. So I'm working with a lot of AI guys too. The open source movement, I think, is extremely, extremely important. So finding communities, building open source, agentic worlds, sharing the wealth, doing all the things that we should do, and not letting the Googles just run the entire world. So I've been spending a lot of time there. I'm usually in like more of the Web3 NFT space. We have a rack of guests coming up over the next month. I think I've got 2 podcasts a week for the next month, at least, maybe even month and a half. I just talked to On-Chain Foundation, beautiful human being, Mihal. He is the head of research, and they're really into doing deep research on blockchain and Web3 because most of the stuff that you see out there is investing focused and how to make people money. And as we all know, that space is atrocious and there's a lot of extraction. But that's enough about me. Those are the updates. I cannot wait to continue to do this. The rest is about Rob. And so what we always do here too is we like to do just a quick little intro, which is he has his master's in emergency and disaster management. Even talk to me about that. Like how do you even find that? Like I didn't even know that was a degree, man.
It found me.
It found you.
Yeah. I left college. Well, I went into college. Let's go even farther back. I went into college thinking that I wanted to become a dentist. Quickly found out that wasn't possible. I did not have, it just wasn't in me. And then I went into sort of broadcasting and thinking that, media was going to be the avenue for me. That also I got burnt out on that really, really quick, disenfranchised, everything else. And then around 2005, I was sitting at home and Katrina happened. And I'm watching everything that was going on. And the one thing that hit me just boom was people that were evacuating but couldn't bring their pets. And because at the time FEMA didn't have a policy on evacuation of people's pets, and I thought that was such a gross gap in coordination. That like I couldn't imagine an entire government agency and there wasn't like one crazy pet person that was like in the agency that would be like raising their hand being like, hey, what about, you know, my dog or my cat or something like that, and not having any plans. And then sort of very serendipitously something came across, I think it was, I saw a flyer or something online about a small little college in New York, called Metropolitan College of New York, that was offering a 18-month master's program in emergency and disaster management. And I thought, I'll give it a whirl. Better to get in on 18 months before it becomes like a 3-year program. And I was one of the very first people to sort of come out into the market with a master's degree that was specifically on emergency and disaster management.
Right.
And so I took to it like a duck to water. I thought it was so interesting, how like the magnitude of the problems, the ability to use your imagination to try and solve those problems, and then with each problem solving solution you ended up sort of creating 3 other problems that you didn't know was going to happen. Which I guess could be, you know, frustrating, but at the same time that consistent challenge, and also having it be very altruistic of trying to respond to something and help people in legitimately their worst times, right? You know, their homes, their communities, their entire lives have been turned upside down or destroyed completely, and you are there trying to pick them up and get their life sort of back on track as much as possible, or to, you know, do all of the prep work ahead of time so that you minimize the impact of those events, and can, you know, so that they can sort of live their life as somewhat normal as possible. So that's really what attracted me to it, and I've been in it for about 20 years now. So
Dude, this is going to be such a beautiful conversation.
Yeah.
I can't wait to have it. You know, and what you said, so many things there already. Being early, a lot of people don't understand the impact of that. You said that. But what really excites me, and the reason why I really wanted to have this conversation, is really what I do at the end of the day is about impacting lives in a different way by telling human stories. And you're doing it in a different way. And I think there's so many different ways to help out, impact the world, and make it a better place. And I can't wait to hear your story as to why you decided to do that, because it comes through your life story that we're about to have.
Yeah.
To add on to your background, though, like you said, you've been doing this for 20 years. And then the other reason we're here, too, is I solely deal with founders and entrepreneurs, because I think the people that start companies that are making decisions at the top also have a different mindset. So I'm really interested in that. You started your company a year ago, TVTP Solutions. We'll talk about what that acronym means in a little bit. But that's it. But before we go to the famous question that I ask everybody, and we start from the beginning and get to that insight that you just told us, I like to share my favorite part, which is a fun fact. And you told me, tell me what you told me to the audience, because I think this is one of the most interesting fun facts about somebody that I've ever heard. So what is it, brother?
Is that my hooligan chant? Affinity for hooligan chants, soccer hooligan chants.
And why?
I don't know. I think there's something uniquely beautiful and powerful to hear, you know, a couple thousand to 10,000 people, if not more, singing in unison, and you know, whether it's funny, or whether it's, as they call, like taking the piss out of somebody on the other team, or making some type of social commentary,
Right.
and taking a tune from Dua Lipa, or taking an old historic chant from like World War II or something like that, and then turning it into something witty, and I think it's so funny. And my Instagram feed, I've got a couple of different sites that I know I'm not the only one that feels this, because there's
Right.
I follow enough sites that post these different these sort of on their stories, and the chants and stuff like that. So I like them. I send them out to all my friends. I think they're hilarious. And it's the one thing that I've got the Liverpool flag behind me, but it's that one thing that I love just listening to them. I could listen to them like all day. I think
Brother,
they're so funny.
You have to promise me that I get on those group chats as well, because
Oh,
I think
absolutely.
that stuff is hilarious. And I mean, a couple things there that I immediately think about is I always remember hanging out with you. You're absolutely hilarious. So humor is such a huge thing, and we'll actually talk. I don't talk about that much on this show, but you're hilarious, and humor seems to guide you a little bit. But then too, the thing about these chants, and the thing that I think is critically important in the future, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later on as well too, is the sense of camaraderie and community. It's just so massive. It's something that we need to figure out, especially as things evolve very, very quickly here in the future. But dude, little just snippet there of your life already. I feel the love. I feel the energy. This is going to be a fantastic conversation. And how we start every one of these conversations is very simple. It's the world famous Mike G podcast experience question, which is, Rob, how did you get the seat you're sitting in today? Please give me chapter 1, 2, and 3. To reiterate for the audience, chapter 1 is your childhood. Prompting questions here are, were you a tinker? Did you play sports? Do you have some vivid memories? Parents or parental figures? What were their mantra? Be kind, pay it forward, work hard, whatever that may be. Give me a couple sentences and we're off and running. Chapter 2, education, like you just talked about, professional career. And then chapter 3 is entrepreneurship. Okay. Before we start, the audience probably is like, hey, this is a little bit different because it's not Web3 and tech. Rob is here because ultimately this show is about human stories and changing lives. And Rob is doing that in such a meaningful way. And as my brand continues to grow, transitioning to LinkedIn more, but this is ultimately what I'm here to do, is tell human stories. And I'm also really excited, Rob, because you're the first guest that is really just totally outside of Web3, AI, and all the other things that I do. But with that being said, man, let's start in childhood, wherever you want to go, and then we're just gonna have a beautiful, natural, authentic conversation. Go for it, brother.
Yeah. So, my childhood was, I moved around a lot. So, my dad worked for the government. He was with the FBI. And so he was taking these sort of like 2-year, 3-year assignments. So I moved around a lot as a kid. When I was around 7 or so, we moved over to England. So we were in the,
I didn't know this.
Yeah, we were in the embassy at London. He was in my dad was sort of not brokering the deals, but he was working with Scotland Yard, which is the British sort of police service, as well as the Americans in sort of winding down the IRA. So this is sort of like late 80s. So this is sort of 87 to 90. So this is kind of right around the time that sort of the IRA was in the final throes. They were doing, some very public bombings and some assassinations, but the war per se in Northern Ireland was getting kind of tired, and they were trying to begin to shift towards more of a political peace kind of thing. So My dad, maybe that's why I'm in now. Kind of a nepo baby. I just took up the mantle of what was going around and just kind of moved forward with it. But that was sort of moving there as a 7-year-old. That was, I remember it kind of vividly, that was, I remember getting a lot of memories, like just sort of like stamped, not just stamped, but like ingrained into my psyche. So, even now in my mid 40s, I can picture how to get to my school. Like I could walk to my school. I haven't visited London since we left when I was like 10 years old. But I can still remember the pathway to school. I can still remember the pathway to Regent's Park. I can still remember going by Lord's Cricket Ground and what that looked like, where the church was, where all the supermarkets were, everything, right? So that time was really, I think, really planted the seed. And then we moved back to the States, and there was, it was a transition. We moved to California first because that was sort of like the only opening to kind of come back to the States. And then we spent about 3 or 4 years there. And then we moved to about 2 hours north of New York City, right on the sort of New York, Connecticut border, where I spent basically middle school, high school. And so I think that transition, actually later in life, all those transitions helped me a lot with sort of understanding what I do now, or the clientele that I sort of deal with, like distressed individuals and people that, we talked about a little bit about community. We'll go into a little bit deeper into sort of my 3 fundamentals of identity, purpose, and community. Not understanding your identity, not understanding your purpose, having a very shifting community all the time, is difficult. And I think it sort of lends itself to individuals latching on to perhaps more destructive behaviors, because not necessarily the message that comes with those destructive things, but those intangibles, that identity, purpose, community, and everything else. Those are the things that we really latch onto, and where we sort of extract those, filling those buckets with whatever messages are filling those buckets. They don't necessarily have to make sense. And I think sort of in the internet age, you begin to sort of see this very non-logical, non-linear sort of pathway.
So scattered, dude.
Of people who are taking bits and pieces from a lot of different things. And kind of creating their own identities, and being able to go online and find a community that accepts them, that also believes in a lot of those things that they believe in, doubles down on a couple of different things, points things out, and now all of a sudden, you've got this purpose. And I think what you said at the top there about people's narratives and how everybody's got a story. It's one of the things when I started this company that I wanted to really focus in on, was that I felt that people really focus their attention on, from basically the threat or the attack and then forward, right? And they focus their attention more on response. And I was sort of curious of like, all right, what happened before that? Right? Like, what was that story? A lot like this. Like, what was their childhood? What was their education? What were the things that they were inspired by or motivated by? Like, what was that story? And was there a point, or were there multiple points in that person's story where somebody could have, interceded or befriended them or talked to them that would have off-ramped them completely onto a different course.
Right.
And really, that's sort of the main mission of the company now. And I credit sort of all that childhood experience of sort of being sympathetic to an ever-changing identity or an
Yeah.
ever-changing purpose, or having a community and then having it extracted and then being put into another community and having to try and restart everything, and how maybe it's more traumatic for certain people, maybe it's a little less traumatic, but it's still paper cuts, if that makes sort of sense, right? Like
Ooh, I like that analogy.
right, it's a bunch of different paper cuts that you sort of have to heal up and everything else, and it can take its toll, and it can be exhausting. And so yeah, I think that's really, from
Dude,
my childhood to now, that's really, I think that's a pretty good synopsis.
bro, you said so many things there. And so which is all beautiful things. Here's the thing that's really fascinating and interesting to me on what you said is you deal with a lot of people that have had transient lives but end bad. You had this transient life and were able to keep it together. I know I'm not saying your life was perfect. Nobody's life is perfect, but you were able to keep it together. So reflecting back, remember, this is all a reflective exercise. Reflecting back, why, what was different about you? Was it the stability of a loving family? Was it the stability of how your parents treated you? Was it the stability of, not stability, but was it because of mantras or other people that affected you, or things that you learned over time? What was that?
It's such a great question, because up until maybe 6-7 years ago, I didn't really know. I had no idea.
Why we're here.
Yeah, I didn't know. I just found it interesting. I found this field interesting, and I couldn't really explain why. And then it began to kind of dawn on me that I was just a very mission-oriented individual, and that I actually enjoyed being at sort of doing something that I felt was worthwhile and that was helping the greater good.
Right.
And that was kind of where I must have found that motivation. Like, that was the thing that was sort of feeding it, was that I believed in the mission of emergency management. I believe in the mission of violence prevention. I believe that these violent attacks can be prevented if we follow like a different sort of mindset or methodology, that we can actually prevent these things, make healthier communities, have better interactions with our friends, and have better interactions with, you know, the different governmental sectors, whether it's mental health or law enforcement or education and everything else. So I think, but that took like a really long time.
What do you think sparked that, though? Other than getting back to like reflecting on that, was there anything, because we just talked about childhood and you're like, oh, I just figured this out. Was there anything there you're reflecting about?
Yeah, I think if you want to take it from childhood, you really want to go like 30,000 foot view and be reflective. I think probably the fact that I moved around so much that I didn't necessarily know my place. And so I wanted to do something helpful that people appreciated, to provide me with that sort of fulfillment. Right.
I love it, man.
And I think that probably was the thing that was that worm, right? Like, that was the thing that I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to show that I had value. And the best way that I thought to do that was to do something that was, altruistic and helpful to as
Right.
many people as I possibly could.
Yeah. And it's always fascinating to me because at the heart of what everybody is a founder on this show, they love to solve problems, right? And at the heart of what you're saying is moving around and sense of identity was a thing that you had to deal with growing up, and now ironically you're here trying to help people solve that problem.
Yeah.
When you look and you start progressing, I'm interested in how does the other stuff start forming, right? You've just figured this out, what, handful of years ago. But in the time, I'm interested in this journey, right? So like sports, were you a tinkerer? What did you decide that you liked at the time as you're evolving and growing? Let's start going to middle school and high school. What did that look like for you?
So I was always into sports. So obviously I've got the Liverpool flag behind me. So I was always a big soccer fan, and played soccer for a lot. But I began to, I was always interested in things that were a little bit more difficult, I guess. I don't,
Hmm.
or so, when we moved to New York, there was a lot of friends I had that, played ice hockey. And
Right.
so, I made it kind of like a mission to learn how to ice skate. Never got like really good, never played on any teams, but got good enough where I could do like a rec league or something like that. I was not really good in high school with languages or any subject matter in per se. But I had a long distance trip that I needed to do between grad school and my house. And I was on the Metro North train. For anybody that's in that New York area, they'll know what I'm talking about. And I would just spend those hours with like a DVD player, early Netflix. I'd have my little red folders, and I taught myself how to be somewhat proficient in French. Had never taken French in high school, just something that I kind of wanted to do. Got interested in music, and just kind of through looking at tabs and things like that online, started to learn, teach myself how to play guitar and things like that.
Mm,
I guess tinkering is sort of yes and no. I'm really eager to learn, but it has to
good one.
be organic. If I'm sitting in a classroom or at a conference and it's difficult for me to sort of do that kind of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm one of those people that really wants to, if I get sort of inspired to do something, I jump into the deep end and see how if I can tread water. And then, I'm more open now, later in life, to those sort of new experiences kind of
Right.
finding me. And so,
So
yeah,
I have a
yeah.
really interesting question here, which is, so you love learning, and I'm thinking about the self, and I don't know if I have an answer, but I just love to hear your thoughts, which is, I was kind of the same way. I actually vividly remember this. My dad wanted me to play the guitar so bad, and he like dragged me to guitar lessons when I was in fourth grade around that time. He didn't really drag me, but he definitely kind of force fed it to me, and didn't come off as my idea. So my question to you is, where do you think this comes from? Because I'm kind of the same way. If you're telling me I should do it, I don't really want to do it. But if I naturally organic am interested in it, I'm totally going to do it. There's something there, but I can't put my finger on that. Do you have any thoughts around that concept?
Inspiration, like, yeah, I mean, not to get too philosophical, I don't
No, no,
know
let's get
necessarily
philosophical.
where inspiration sort of comes from.
Right.
It could have just been a fact, we talked about, me traveling a lot as a kid. It could have just been a fact of, there just wasn't really enough time, that we didn't really settle at any
Mm,
point where you kind of let those opportunities find you. And
right.
so it was kind of like, this works. This soccer sort of thing works. So every new town we would go to, it was like, all right, first thing we do, we'll get them into soccer. I love it. I'm not poo-pooing it, but once we started to begin to settle, it was kind of like, okay, now what? Like, what have I felt like I've missed out on, or what is the thing that I would like to try?
Yeah.
And most of that inspiration happened sort of after I left high school, and even to a certain extent was sort of like in my last final years of college, before I began to sort of really venture out to sort of take on these different challenges
Yeah.
with myself. It's a maturity thing, I think. But
But
yeah,
I think what I heard you say, and I think this is important for everybody to hear, um, most of, and I've talked to hundreds of founders at this point, it is about, you said like inspiration, but really more self exploration. You have to be curious. And it it's easy to say it, but this curiosity comes in many different forms. And I don't like this is the other hard thing, and this is why I love doing what we're doing. We're talking about these general concepts, and hopefully, well, not hopefully, I know somebody's going to relate to already what you said. You love soccer, you've moved around, that profoundly impacted you, and now you've figured out that you want to help people solve that problem in the sense that, it can be negative for people. But people need to understand that curiosity is one of the main ways to start a business, to start figuring out yourself. Like these are the critical things. Any thoughts on that concept of curiosity too? Do you agree with me? Is there anything you want to layer on there?
absolutely. Curiosity, and also a little bit of letting go of control. I think that,
Mm,
like, having started this business, really realizing how little control I kind of have on the market,
yeah,
right? And I think it's interesting for me right now, what I'm learning, and my curiosity is, I thought it was going to be one way. It's been completely different.
yeah,
And I'm learning how to be a business owner now. I'm learning how to promote myself in a different way. Um,
totally.
and how that gets translated. So we talk about narratives. I talk about narratives in a lot of my awareness trainings for safety, of the narrative that the establishment puts. So whether it's
Mhm,
a
mhm.
office building, or it's a school, or whatever, and the security measures that they put in, and there's a narrative there, whether it's outward or subliminal, that people translate into their own narrative, right?
Yes,
And so a lot,
such
what
a
I
good
see,
point.
especially with schools, the example I would use is sort of like the SROs, or the school resource officers that are there.
Mhm.
Um, their narrative, many times when I talk to them, is that they look at themselves as like a second guidance counselor, like
Mhm.
that one trusted adult. Like, they want to be friends with the kids. They want to be able to have conversations if they're having a bad day, work through problems and things like that. That's not always the narrative that the students and staff have of the SRO, right?
Mm.
And so what you get is sort of these counteracting narratives that then sort of muddy the waters, where the SRO doesn't feel like they're being as effective, and the students and staff don't think that like the SRO is being as effective either. And there's just a mismatch there. It's some of it can be done through little tweaks, but really understanding, okay, what is the message that you want to put out? How is that going to be interpreted? And sometimes you don't necessarily have control over how it's being interpreted because you
Right.
don't necessarily see your message from that other point of view.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
communication is a huge part in this, and I think we'll talk about it. But you said something super, super interesting, which I think is a very important topic, and it's different for everybody, but letting go. This is such a fascinating concept to me because for me, in my personal, and you have seen so many different things. So I would love your insight on this of what do you think helps an individual let go? Because sometimes it's by force. Let's say you have a job for 15 years, you lose your job. You're now in the depths of letting go. For me, and I think this kind of relates to what you're doing, and you can yes and me here, but the easiest way for me and my experience that was to let go is feeling comfortable. One of the main
yeah.
things is financial, right? One of the main things is understanding that you have a place to come home and a house. That enables and helps you to let go and kind of remove yourself from the establishment, like you said. Talk to me about letting go, your concept of it, and what you've seen over time that helps people do that.
Yeah, I'll reword it just a little bit, but I think when you find that you or believe that you have value in
Mm,
anything,
mhm.
that allows you to sort of free up a lot of space.
Love that.
Because it goes back to those three pillars, that identity, purpose, community. When those things are really strong, um, and you believe that you have sort of value, you are able to sort of let those types of things come at you,
Mhm.
um, and let go a little bit, because you have enough confidence in yourself that whatever problem you're going to end up facing, you're going to be able to sort of ride those waves, and come out the other side.
Yep.
And I think a lot of reason why we hold so tight to these things is because when you begin to shake those foundations really, really hard, it is incredibly traumatic and can be very, very disruptive. And
Mhm.
so, you know, latching yourself on, so many of us, our identities and our purposes are intertwined into what we do on a day-to-day basis, whether
Yep.
that's going to an office, or what however money is coming in, that's what we tie ourselves to. Our community might be a small circle of close friends. They may be our coworkers. They may be people that we know only through online chat, channels. Um, the community, I've seen a lot where you have, you're hip to a certain show. Like if
Mhm.
you are watching a show and there's a certain way in which they describe things, and you're down with the lingo or you're down with the joke, and then you hear somebody else, you know
Right.
at the grocery store say something like that, or they have a t-shirt or anything like that, you're kind of like part of the club. You feel like you're part of something.
Right.
um Letting go is incredibly, I think people assume when you say letting go that you're just sort of like laying on your back in the ocean and just letting whatever like comes. It's not exactly that. It's more of letting go being comfortable within yourself, knowing who
Mm,
you are, what you're not,
yes.
sometimes even more importantly, and knowing that because those things are solid, and they have you're standing on a good base, that whatever comes at you, you're going to be able to cut through that wave. You may go up, down, slosh around a little bit, but you're going to end up coming out the other side, because a lot of these things that hit us are very temporary.
Yeah, dude.
And it's hard when you're in the midst of it to believe that this is just a temporary phase, and we're going to get through it. And then you come out the other side and you look around you and you're like, oh, okay,
Dude,
on to the next one.
this is such a beautiful conversation. One of the kind of the other way to say this is the self-reflection. When do you like I just wrote this down. I was like, I have to write a tweet about this in the sense that um the real journey does start with this whole concept, which is letting go, self-aware, like self-reflection, and but ultimately self-awareness, understanding who you are as a human being, what you said, not who you want to be or what your current situation is projecting you to making you think who you should be. This is who you truly are. And to get there, what you said, and this is the concept, this is like kind of an AI agent, and other idea for a company is, how do you start that conversation? Unfortunately, mine came through just like traumatic health things that I was forced to have that conversation, or maybe near death would happen, right? I don't want people to get to that, to have this
No,
conversation. But it's difficult.
it
It's
is
very
difficult.
difficult, and that's why people don't do that. So my question to you is, this is one of your core pillars.
Yeah.
What, and you've seen this in so many forms, what do you think are some of the most common helpful things that you can tell people on how do you start having this conversation?
Yeah. So you have to really step back and be kind of hypercritical on yourself,
Mhm.
not in a negative, demeaning way, but in sort of like, all right, let's really take stock here.
Yeah.
This happened when I moved up here, to Rhode Island. I had basically gotten the job that I wanted to get. I was in an area that I wanted to get. I got the house. I got, the family. All these things that I sort of worked for to get, I got, and I was still like incredibly angry. I was just as upset with sort of like the day-to-day things that were going on that I
Mhm.
was when I was, upset in college, or upset when I left college, or
Mhm.
that I was upset with in DC. And I kind of took stock, and I'm like, why does the scenery always change? And then why am I still feeling this way? And I had to really realize, like, oh, it's not the scenery that's the problem. It's me. It's my perception of everything.
Mhm.
And I had to start really breaking those walls down, that there wasn't going to be, a a pot of gold on the other end of the hill, right? There wasn't going to be, oh, it'll be better when this happens, right? It'll be
Mhm.
better when I get this. It'll be
Yeah.
better when the kids are older and I don't have to deal with their stuff. There's always going to be something that is going to kind of, you know, throw a wrench into those plans. And so there's no point in sort of trying to create the perfect storyline scenario. I
Yeah.
see it a lot with some of my younger friends who are beginning to sort of wonder if they want to start a family or something like that. And they'll ask me like, oh, well, we don't have the house completely right, or we're still saving up for something, and et cetera. And I always tell them, like, there's never going to be a perfect time.
Right.
There's never going to be a perfect time where all of your ducks are all in a row, everything is set, and life is going to give you just sort of this little window where you can go and do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
That's just not how life works, and you just have to kind of accept that instability, that there's never going to be a perfect time to do something, or the scenario will not be ideal. But you have to ask yourself, like, okay, well, how bad do I want this?
Yeah.
And I always tell the people who are thinking of having kids, like, don't ever say we're trying to have kids. Say we're going to have kids.
Right.
Because
I love it, dude.
if you're trying to have kids, to me, that signals to me that you're sort of like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Like, it would be nice if it happens. Like, a kid is such a like overwhelming life occurrence that changes your life so dramatically that if you are sort of half and half, especially if you're a man, if you're a father, because at the end of 9 months, that baby's out, right? And I noticed that real quick, that I realized that my wife had like a 9-month lead up where her body was changing, and she had to sacrifice certain things that she liked to do. And so she kind of had this runway of realizing, like, oh, my life is changing. And I didn't, because I didn't have to. My body wasn't changing. And
Right.
I wasn't sacrificing in the same way she was sacrificing. And so I was kind of along for the ride. And then all of a sudden, it's game time. And I'm like, I'm not prepared. Like, what do you mean I can't do this anymore? Or what,
Right.
how, like, all these different things. And so, there's never going to be, to go back to sort of like, I guess the main core point is that there's never going to be a perfect scenario. But you just have to ask yourself, like, how much do you want it?
Yeah. But you said something super, never going to be a right time. But you said, dude, you gave me chills when you said this, how you described it, because again, this is your perspective. But to find your why, I think step one is you have to look in the mirror and realize all of your anger, all of your hate, all your frustration, anxieties, depression, it's you. It is nobody else. And that is the hard part. And you actually just verbalized what I wanted. Like, I was really kind of, I didn't know how to start this. We're calling it Magic Mirror for now, which is an agent through an LLM to help you start having this conversation. And I think you just solved it. And I knew it myself, which is go down all the list of your frustrations, your angers, all of the things we just said. And you have to 100% believe that the reason why you feel the way you feel is because it's you.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out how to start letting go and figuring out how and why you think the way you think, and having that conversation and taking that very gray, blurry picture and turning it into a clear picture of your mission, your vision, and your why. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy as well. Like, so one of the things that was routinely feeding the beast per se was, something would be not to my liking, or was getting me frustrated, and then something would happen and I go, see, see, this will never get better. Like, this is just what it is. And it's sort of like this doom loop. And one of the things that I see in my work with people who are sort of like going down this pathway of radicalization and potentially the pathway of violence is that they get stuck in that sort of doom loop where every negative thought gets reinforced. And so the algorithms will feed into, things that already fit into what they are angry about, or their the community that they latch onto will reinforce the narrative, or will provide videos or different things that go, see, like, this is everywhere. There is no safe space. This is what we have to fight against. This is, this is why they are the enemy and we are on the side of good and everything else. And so that ends up, when those messages start merging with community, purpose, identity, that's when you see those people really kind of fall off the cliff. Because they're
losing their sense of self.
Yep. They have now created
their sense of self.
A narrative of the world that they feel not in control of.
Yep.
But that they also feel that they know where those pinpoints are, like who's actually driving the boat, and they don't feel like it's them. They feel like it's all these other people that is contributing to their frustration. And so they, some of them are able to, find something that diverts their attention to it. But more and more, we're starting to see that there is they're lashing out. Okay, you are making me miserable. I have this world view that's being reinforced by all of my major pillars, right? I identify with this group. Their purpose is this. The community feeds into those types of things. My value is attached to all those things. And now I am going to lash out at you for making my life miserable.
Right. So a question, real quick question, because I don't want to lose this thought. You're absolutely, in other words, saying these people have completely lost their sense of self-identity. You dealing with as many people as you have that are going down the tube the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I do what I do is I'm firmly convinced. That's my alarm. I'm firmly convinced all people are good people. They just need to find that, right?
Yeah.
So it's really the sense of good and evil, right? And my interpretation of this is, I think evil can be born if you're so lost in that world for so long, you're just the self identity is gone. But if you can find that, people will be good. What are your thoughts? Did you want to expand on that? Do you agree?
I totally agree, and I think it's a lot easier than people think. So,
tell me about that.
Yeah. So one of the things that we preach in our awareness trainings is this idea of the difference between an intervention and a negotiation. All right. So I don't treat sort of the intersection of somebody who's sort of on this radicalization path, who's doing behaviors that are of concern. People are worried that they may, lash out in some sort of violent nature and things like that, and they feel like they need to do an intervention. I think that's the wrong way, almost in sort of like that 50-50 kind of thing that we talked about with having kids. Like, you got to be sort of all in it.
Yeah.
An intervention has a power dynamic that is top down. And you're dealing with somebody that is already struggling and feels somewhat powerless. And so when you come in over the top with an intervention and you essentially tell that person that the community that they are attached to is wrong, their purpose is destructive, and their identity is also wrong,
right?
And that you, whoever you is doing the intervention, is going to put them on the right path to save them, you can sort of see how that narrative doesn't play well, right? You're going to strip everything that's important to me. You are not going to let me have a say in it. You're not going to let me have any control over it, which is what I have felt already before I got down this path. And then you're going to place me in something that where I don't necessarily want to go. And you're going to expect me to sort of do the straight and narrow. That's not the proper way to off-ramp an individual.
100%. You're wrong. Your sense of self sucks.
Yeah.
You need to be this way.
Yeah. That's not how it, and what happens is that you actually dig in your heels. You actually double down on all of those things that people think are concerning or destructive, because the ability to just strip all that away, again, you're going to be cast off into the sea without any sense of self-control or whatever. So I like to say you're actually doing a negotiation. And there's a video that I show within the awareness training, and it's on YouTube. You can sort of see it. It is I believe it's a like tube station, underground station in, I think it's Stockholm. And they wanted people to take the stairs. They had an escalator there and they had the stairs, and they wanted more people to take the stairs. So logically, what you could do is you could just shut down the escalator. You could put yellow tape on it and just say nobody can go down that or up those stairs.
Right.
What they end up doing was they put sort of these piano panels on the stairs. So when you stepped on the stairs, a note from the piano would play. And what you saw was that people were so intrigued by it that even those individuals, elderly or young kids or mothers carrying a bunch of bags and the kids, who probably should have used the escalator, ended up going to the stairs.
Right.
Because there was a negotiation there. You can still do what you're doing, but look at how much more fun and engaging in this side of the stairway is. And I use that as an analogy during sort of interventions, is that you are not trying to tell somebody, you're not trying to create a blockade. What you are trying to do is create an alternative roadway that they feel is more intriguing and is better for them. Because again, we get confused that the reason these people have become radicalized is because they have attached themselves to a message, that they believe the message. That's not necessarily the case. What they have attached themselves to is all of the things that come with the message: an identity, a purpose, a community. That's what they latch onto. And so if you can provide those things in a different way, they will gravitate towards those things rather than continuing on this destructive path.
Yeah, dude, this is so, I popped this up. I want to break here. We're actually, I think, just gonna skip, like, you've already done a good background of yourself. I want to break here. Two things. One, my man Chain Brain is watching. And he had that. He said what you said. I thought in like a beautiful, succinct way, which is if you attack a person's belief, they'll attempt to guard it with everything they got, literally like a cornered fox. This is the way. This is like that was a beautiful way to kind of
Yeah.
visualize it. We're also rapidly approaching 100 people, which blows my mind because I didn't promote this at all because it was not, it's currently not part of my brand. There's not a community. Rob's really starting off from scratch here. But what is cool, what this means to me is I knew at the heart of what I actually did was talk about this stuff, which is the why. I get entrepreneurs to talk about this. Yes, we do talk about the project in tech. One of the things that I need everybody to do right now, comment, retweet, do all the things because more people need to have this conversation. So I had to break into that. But there's actually a really hot topic in the Web3 world. So there's this platform called Pump.fun. And what they've done is they've integrated the blockchain and token creation. So right now, actually, me and you could go, this stream could be on this platform. And what it would do is it will automatically launch a token. And that token, every time people buy or sell it, we get a cut of the creator fee. So we can monetize it. So what it's actually done is just proliferate the money grabbing attention that this space has, the extractive nature, to the point where people are like, literally a couple days ago, there was a guy just eating raw meat till he got salmonella. Like this is what these people are doing to make money. And everyone's like, this is the greatest thing because creators, they're calling it the creator economy, right? Creators now have a new way to monetize and they're getting, but my argument here is you're just exactly what you said. You're proliferating the community of shallowness, extraction, and I will go to any length to make money. Does that make sense? Is that kind of related to what you're saying? Do you have any comments on that?
No, absolutely, because we have a narrative that fame provides sort of a sense of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Money provides a sense of freedom. And that freedom is sort of a code word for control, for value and control. I have value in the world because I am famous for eating spoiled meat, right? I have and people will pay me to do so. I have a value because I am a very rich person. Therefore, I must be smart and I must have, you must listen to me. And my ideas are fantastic because all of my employees who also depend on me to, pay their, to fund their lives say that I'm great and therefore I am. And I think this goes back to sort of that sense of self and identity and everything else that we've sort of been talking about. I focus in on radicalization in the sense that it has a negative connotation.
Your values are negative and impacting the world in a negative way.
Right.
Question. Go keep on going.
That's not always the case, right? So if you were to go to a school board meeting and start disparaging all the teachers and disparaging, the school and the system and the administrators and everything else, they're going to get very, very offended, right? Why? Because a lot of teachers, when you ask, oh, what do you do? They say, I'm a teacher. That's their identity. I teach young kids. That's my purpose.
Yeah.
Other teachers and administrators and people within the education sector, that is my community, right? You saw it during COVID, healthcare workers or epidemiologists and things like that. There was a lot of mixed messages that were going out and things like that. But you saw this sort of like pushback on people that had been in that field for 20, 30 years. And, they felt it was a personal attack. Like, I've been studying these diseases for my entire life. I have an education a degree that is there. All the people that I work with and talk to, they're not bad people. We're not doing this for, nefarious reasons. And so you saw them like dig in their heels. And so it's not always a sense of like everybody that becomes kind of radicalized in the sense of like, oh, these are radical extremists that are going to do harm. I think it's a lot of just, you can be sort of radicalized without thinking that any kind of violence is going to help you, because
Right.
if you understand that sort of identity, purpose, and community, and how essential it is to our survival just as a human being, the human brain cannot live not knowing what it is, if that makes sense.
Oh,
right?
yeah. It's the man's search to meaning, man. It's the reason why it's one of the most famous books ever written. It really boils down to simple principle that if you do not have meaning and your brain does not know what your meaning is and your sense of self is, usually ends poorly.
Yeah, it'll find something. It'll find something. And that's why I say it's usually not the message. It's all the intangibles that come with the message.
Dude.
And it becomes very, very difficult to take those things piece by piece out of your life, because you are essentially trying to create a new identity, purpose, and community that you may not have a real strong affiliation for.
Dude, one thing, we've been talking for well over an hour already. This has been beautiful. Two, though, I'll ask this question, and then we're gonna kind of jump to chapter 3. I want to reset, and I want you to tell me exactly what you do with your company, your why for the company, and then we can talk about really like your current challenges, what you think about in the future, and we'll start wrapping it up.
Cool.
I do have a hard stop, but incredible conversation so far. So my question to you is this concept of value. We said that you could get attached to bad values and that it ends well. With everything that you've seen, what is that transition or the values that impact people in a positive way? What does that look like, and what have you seen? And what are things that people latch onto to go in the good direction?
So I use the analogy of The Price is Right. Okay. The reason why The Price is Right has been on the air for so long is because human beings don't actually have a good monitor to assess value at all.
Interesting.
If I pointed to a TV and asked you, like The Price is Right does, like, how much is that TV? That's why they have like 5 different prices, because nobody actually really knows. And so we are always struggling, whether it's with like an actual material good, like a toaster or a TV, with value, or internally, like, do I have value? How much is my value? Right? We don't know. So that should sort of be a little bit of a comforting fact for people, in that, like, you have the ability to define your value. Now, the market may not necessarily agree with how much you're charging or how much your services are, but you are able to say, well, okay, I might lose some clients, but this is what I believe the value that I have is. And I may lose some opportunities, but I know my sense of self and I know my value. So yeah, from a sense of value standpoint, I would give people give yourself a really long leash, because it's going to be everybody's experience with value and how much they're willing to engage with it is a sliding scale, and everybody's going to be completely different.
Yeah. And so what's interesting to me though is you interpreted that via value of money improving your worth and the skill sets. I actually was getting at actual values, right? Integrity, kindness, honesty. I think my question to layer onto that, because that was actually a beautiful insight too. I already wrote a tweet about that, or a draft of a tweet about that. What are the values that people start believing in associated with their sense of self that you've seen radically change people that are deep in the wrong direction, right? These people are already radicalized. They're starting and open to having the conversation that "Hmm, maybe I'm not in the greatest place right now." What does that conversation look like?
So that conversation is a much longer conversation, a
Right.
lot like this one, right? Like you have to really do the work on those people to really get to the core issue that is causing them to sort of go in this destructive
Mm,
behavior. That is not a simple sort of, oh, they, you know, this happened, one thing happened, and then they were off to the races. That's not how it happens. Radicalization doesn't necessarily happen in a time frame of like you see one thing on the news, or you see a couple things within a 3-month span, and now you're radicalized. That doesn't happen. Radicalization happens over an extremely long period of time. So you may have one incident when you were 5 years old, and you don't really necessarily know how that impacts, and then the next thing that happens may be at 10. The next thing, you might have a small cluster of events at 15, 16, and then at 22, 25, things really begin to hit the skids or something like that.
right.
That is where the prevention methodology really focuses in on, is okay, understanding that there's more to this story. What are those seemingly innocuous one-off sort of events in a person's life that you wouldn't necessarily attribute to being radicalized or violence, but serve as we talked about, sort of like the death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Right.
Maybe that wound inspired them to go in one direction, and then they were inspired again by another event 3 or 4 years down the road that sort of accelerated that path, and then all of a sudden that cluster happened. And that can be something like, a lot of the risk factors, and this is why we don't really focus so much on risk factors and focus more on behavioral indicators, because risk factors can be like pretty much anything. So, things like divorce, things like, food insecurity, housing insecurity, moving around a lot, your typical risk factors that are like, all right, well, am I going to go to like a threat assessment or call the police because a friend of mine's parents are getting divorced or separated? No, right? Is that a life event that might spur some behaviors into one direction? Yeah. What happens when that person is living in an area of the country where drug abuse is rampant, domestic violence is rampant, divorces everywhere, people are incarcerated a lot, And that's just, they don't look at that as a risk factor. They look at that as just sort of life.
Interesting.
Right. And so it's very difficult for people when you're trying to do this prevention work to really be able to connect the dots. And one of the things that we try to teach is, okay, what mechanisms do you have in place, whether it be at a school or a town level or a county level, to help ease those transitions of those life events, right? And what do you have in place where you can start, where somebody could take a look at it and go, okay, there's a lot of points here and we're putting the puzzle together and we really need to do something. And creating that culture within the office, or creating that culture within the town or the school, where there are those processes to begin that sort of movement towards having that negotiation or having that long form talk. To really figure out, okay, what is it that's motivating? What are those problems? And then what can we do to put in place those types of much like the piano stairs, like let's find something that you are interested in, or let's find something that you feel passionate about that is a lot more productive, and we can sort of gather up those resources and services and put it together for you and let you sort of express yourself through that lane rather than through the lane that you're already on.
And what you said is so beautiful. And I love this conversation. I'm a little propping myself up a little bit, because in the set, like, I knew this years ago, and I knew how critically important deep, meaningful conversations are, because what you said is deep conversations help you understand the nuance in a human. And I think one of the other problems that social and the society that we live in now has created is there are so many people that just treat everything as a black and white decision.
Yeah.
And life is so many shades of gray, and people need to understand that. And a lot of times there are issues or situations where I don't even think a human can say whether that's right or wrong. But you need to understand why you believe and think that way. Right?
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the most interesting things that I learned when I was, when I started in this field and started doing this work and things like that, was that I always believed that opinions filtered into behaviors and then filtered into feelings. It's actually the direct opposite. So you can't change somebody's opinion and think that their behavior is going to change. You actually have to make them feel something which will change their behavior, and thus their opinion changes because their behavior changes. So it's actually reversed. So back to your sort of, when you said things are black and white, we focus a lot, and I see schools that with sort of like ESL, emotional learning and all these different things that they put in. I'm all for it. I think understanding your emotions and being able to know how to relax or be able to verbalize when you're frustrated and what's making you frustrated is incredibly important. But the way in which they do it is very mechanical, very linear. And that's not how emotions work. And I think you've seen over like the past, couple months here with the recent attacks that we've had of people who are really a mishmash. They're not, there is no connecting line necessarily between, a neo-Nazi transgender, who is, hates Trump, or, a a groiper who also might also be gay, right? Like all these things, the media and everybody else is like, I don't get it. Yeah, you don't need to get it.
Right.
That's not the point. You're focusing on the wrong things. You're trying to focus in on like, oh, they must have been motivated by A plus B, and then their behavior and their opinions are C. No, they were motivated by things that that connected with them on a feeling level. It doesn't have to make sense because it's just filling those buckets of identity, purpose, and community. They don't care necessarily if it makes sense to anybody else. And so that's why you're starting to sort of see these sort of amalgamations and these mishmashes, is because there aren't really purebreds. And to fight this sort of epidemic, if you want to say it, in a very linear fashion, that you're going to try and change opinions, which are going to change people's behavior, is backwards. You need to get these people to feel, which we've been talking about for the last, hour, 15 plus minutes, on those intangibles. I feel that I'm going to be accepted over here, or I feel like I'm going to have a greater sense of value by aligning with this stuff,
right,
rather than this stuff.
I love the saying, reverse the equation. That should be one of your marketing campaigns. Reverse the equation. It's a beautiful, beautiful, simple way to say it. This is an interesting, so we got about 15 minutes.
Okay.
I have a question from the audience, which is interesting because it's like a little bit of a tangent, but kind of related to what we're saying, which is the sense of self in this world that we live in, more in the professional career. We have this like juxtaposition of opinions that I need you as a worker in my office 5 days a week, or you can work hybrid, or you can work 100% remote. What are your opinions on, since you're an empathetic person, how do you build that trust? Why do people think in these different ways about how you contribute and work for a company? Are there any thoughts there?
Yeah. I think the working from home thing got super, super accelerated. I think, I remember sort of pre-COVID, I would do maybe like 1 day a week from home. Usually on a Friday. It's a low impact day. There's not a lot going on. You log in, no big deal. COVID really accelerated that whole thing. And I think changed a lot of people's perspective on how they were working and what they were doing at the office. And it's interesting to me that the sort of power dynamic between working from home and going into the office, where employees feel far more in control when they work from home. They get on a meeting, they're done with the meeting, they pop upstairs, they do the laundry, they pop out, they get, go to grocery shopping, they come back, they do their next meeting, they work, instead of 9 to 5, maybe they put the kids to bed, and then they'll work from like 8:30 to 10:30 on the thing. There's a control factor that they enjoy, and they feel that they are more sort of efficient and effective by having that control. When you're a manager and you don't have that constant sight, or you are constantly wondering what they're doing or what the employee is doing, you begin, I think from an employer standpoint, you begin to wonder like how loyal they are to your company, how much effort are they actually putting into these deadlines and these projects and things like that. And your first inclination is, all right, well, I don't know, so therefore I'm going to bring everybody back so that I have that sense of I can see everything. I have that sense of control. And that, again, with narratives, that's not the narrative that your employees might necessarily have. They look at it as being wildly disruptive. I know that my own wife turned down a lot of money from a company simply because they wanted her in the office 3 days a week. And her current employer allows her to telework full time. You know, people are going to have their own sense of what's important to them. You know, there's a lot of other costs that come to going to the office. You know, you're put on a schedule, so it's very difficult with people with kids. If you have to go into a major metropolitan city, you have to figure out how to get there, parking, what happens if there's a you know, if there's an accident, there's a huge traffic jam. You know, thinking about aftercare, before care, you know, doctor's appointments, all these different things in life that make everything far more stressful. And then if you're, what's going to naturally happen for your employee is that they're going to sort of be focusing more on getting those things sort of situated in the office than really focusing on what you want to do.
Right.
You know, I think for certain jobs, you know, if your job is basically just pulling a lever and there's not much, you know, critical thinking or creativity that really has to go into it, it's probably not that big of a deal. If you're trying to be a forward thinking company and you want people to sort of be imaginative and be inventive and really begin to push boundaries and things like that, you like inspiration. I think we've kind of outlined over the last, you know, over this conversation, like it kind of, you have to be open to it. And if you don't allow your employees to kind of have that time to kind of chew on ideas and think about it and be inspired, you might really be stifling a lot of creative ways to really elevate your business, get higher profitability, become more effective, just because they're focused on so many other things.
Yeah, dude. And it's so, that's why I love with these conversations. It's coming full circle. Literally, we had a deep conversation about letting go. And that's what it is, which is corporations are really good at producing efficiency and profits. And the way they do that is by keeping you in the office and making you feel, and in a sense, trapping you, which comes with a lot of negative feelings. Can I
contribute a quick story? I hate to interrupt you, but I think this actually, this efficiency versus sort of effective is a really interesting thing, because I think it permeates into a lot of different things, not just sort of in the workspace. So I've listened to this guy for a while. His name is Rory Sutherland. He is the head of marketing at Ogilvy, which is a huge marketing firm.
Yep.
One of the stories that he tells is they wanted to create sort of a bullet train between London and Manchester, and it was going to cut the travel time by about 30 minutes, right? And they were going to spend about $1.6 billion creating this bullet train. Highly efficient, you know, gets you there 30 minutes before, you know, like quicker, everything else. And he said that was really the wrong question to ask. The question wasn't asked, how do we get to London to Manchester faster? Because you're constrained by just physics and technology and things like that. It was, how do you make the ride from London to Manchester so enjoyable that everybody wants to take it?
Mm.
And does 30 minutes really matter? And his joke was, you know, you could have spent a quarter of that money hiring all the world's best supermodels, going down the aisles, giving everybody free champagne, and they would have asked for the train to be slowed down. right? And
Interesting.
I think this focus on what is efficient, and that efficiency creates enjoyment or is somehow better, or that the products that are more efficient are like, that's the selling point. No, the experience that you have with the product, or the experience that you have with the service, is what's important. So you want to not, and if there are inefficiencies around being effective, then so be it. Because I think your real goal is to be effective, not necessarily efficient. If you can be effective and efficient, great. But if you're only chasing efficiency, you often are cutting things that people actually like, that people want. People don't necessarily care about.
Yeah. And dude, Jane Brain and everybody else at Washington knows exactly where I'm going to go with this, which is this is the fundamental pandemic that we are about to approach, because we've created a being in AI that is amazing at efficiency. Literally, CEOs are in trouble because at some point there will be no company and there will be one person guiding who is the CEO. And there's a fantastic book that I'll send to you. And the point is, AI is going to get to the point where it won't need a CEO to make a decision, because the CEO is actually a roadblock, because they're human and they take longer than an AI being would be to make a more efficient business decision. And we're going to get to that point way quicker than anybody thinks. And when we're at that point, we're now left with exactly what you just said. What do you do?
Yeah.
What do humans do? How do they create value? How do they feel their sense of self? This is actually the biggest problem that humanity has to figure out. And your story about just starting to understand that concept is critically important. And that's what this whole conversation has been about. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful way to start wrapping it up. Before we get there, though, we haven't even got to, I told you, man, we could talk for like 100 hours.
I could talk, yeah.
We're going to have more conversations. We'll figure out how to continue to make content. I love this stuff, man. What are you doing currently? So, one, what the heck does the acronym even mean?
Sure.
TVTP Solutions. What does that mean? What are you currently experiencing, fundamentally the problems that you're trying to solve? And then after that, we'll talk about what does the next 3 to 6 months look like for you? I'll ask you one final question I ask every guest. I'll give you my final comments. We'll start and we'll shut her down for the day. Cool. So start with that. Start with the
title. So title stands for Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention. So that's an acronym that's used within sort of like the threat assessment space, the prevention space. And I just adopted it. I just took it. You know, it creates a little bit of curiosity. What does it stand for? It's sort of a scary term. But I also think there's like a nice juxtaposition of when it's attention grabbing. And then when I start going into more of the prevention techniques and how you go about seeing the behavioral changes, what do you do? How do you set up a culture of prevention and things like that? People are very, very, or have been very positively responding to that message. Right. One of the things that I focused in on was that there was a definition change, a definition sort of misunderstanding of what prevention is. Really what most people believe is prevention is actually protection, preparedness, or response. And so protection basically being your cameras, your surveillance, your bulletproof glass, your reinforced doors, those types of things. That's protection. preparedness, active shooter drills, putting cops on campus, SROs, armed, things like that. That's preparedness. Response, obviously, is response. But we've basically focused and tried to say that those three elements are prevention, because you're preventing the loss of life. True. What I try to do is show all of those three things, protection, preparedness, response, all has a place. I'm not diminishing any of it. But what I'm asking in prevention is, okay, you stop that individual from bringing a knife to school. Okay, your protection, your preparedness, and your response worked. Prevention is asking the question, why did they bring a knife to school?
100%.
Okay, so when we talk about prevention, we're not talking about installing all of those other things. We're actually installing a process where there's a, as the tagline for TVTP Solutions is, human focused, prevention based, right? Or prevention focused. I should know my own tagline. We focus in on the story that led up to that. And was there any opportunity within that person's character arc and narrative before they went and did that act that you could have gone and gotten that individual help? So that's one. Two, identifying gaps. Is there, one, a gap where there aren't any resources or services available to you and therefore they need to be created? Or is more the case, the gap is a coordination gap? Okay, so when you hear about an attacker that happened and you find out that, you know, they were getting mental health services, or they were connected to mental health services or searching for mental health services, they had a long history of behavioral problems at school, they may have had interactions with law enforcement. Okay, that's not a reporting problem, which often gets reported of the see something, say something, right? We don't necessarily have a reporting problem in this country, because if you're, you know, on the radar of three different sectors, you're known. That's, you're reporting them. What you have is a gap in coordination. So what often happens, you know, you call the police. I have a neighbor, they're doing some concerning behavior. They go, they talk to the neighbor. They're not doing anything illegal. There's very little that the police can do if there's no, you know, illegality being there. They get put on a list. Okay. You go, you talk to a mental health professional, you know, hey, my neighbor, I'm worried about them. They will ask you, okay, well, is that neighbor a threat to themselves or others? Well, I don't know yet, but I want somebody to figure that out. All right, well, they're going to have to get to the back of the line because I have a limited number of clinicians and I have a stack of people that actually are an imminent threat, right? And then the schools, you go to the schools and you'll say like, hey, I have some concerning behavior, and they will go, great, we have this program or we have this thing. We'll do it all in-house, right? And there's no coordination between any of these different entities. So what we try to do is we try to establish something called a behavioral threat assessment team. So you can have a behavioral threat assessment team at a school, you can have it town-wide, but really what it is sort of a Knights of the Round Table kind of thing, where you're bringing all of these different sectors together and having the deep conversation. Okay, we have at the school, we have a threat assessment team. We have our bus drivers that are, you know, if they see something, we have a process by which they can report something that's concerning. Our janitors can report something that's concerning. We had a bunch of towns that incorporated FedEx drivers and Amazon drivers and things like that, because those delivery people didn't have a pipeline to report suspicious activity or to report concerning behavior, right? We have sanitation departments now on town-wide BTAMs because, hey, they see things, they're on the same route all the time, they can possibly see things. Now, this might sound a little minority report-ish, right? Where we're trying to get to somebody before they commit violence. I will tell you it's multidisciplinary, okay? So we had individuals who were being kicked out of their home and needed housing assistance, and a bus driver said, you know, hey, I saw this kid, they were getting out of the car and the car looked like it was filled with sleeping bags and things like that, and it's a Tuesday, they're not going camping, right? Let's go and see if there's something there. They ended up talking to the student. That student had shown no behavioral signs that would be threatening. But if left to fester, if they hadn't gotten resources to that family and to that individual, there may have been some bad consequences, right? If that situation had been left to fester. Right. We have had experiences with getting people who are making threats online, or are getting a little bit more aggressive, and realizing that the reason why they are getting aggressive is because this one class, their classmates aren't taking it as seriously as they are, and just a simple schedule change evens it out. And so we talk about sort of this identity thing. We talked about it a little bit earlier, and I'm focusing a little bit more on like school age children, but you can imagine how you extrapolate this into sort of adulthood, right? So if you are a veteran who has been in the military for 25 years and had your life very regimented, every day of your life, you are a soldier, right? Like your identity, your purpose, your community is all wrapped in the military, and then you retire, and that might be something that you were really looking forward to, but 2 weeks into it, you no longer have that identity, purpose, and community like you used to. That disrupts things, right? And so the prevention model is trying to understand how that pathway happens, and then creating the culture of prevention so that you have a more proactive, offensive type approach towards combating these issues. Because protection, preparedness, and response is defense minded. You are sitting back, putting these things forward, hoping that when something happens, that it will stop it. Rather than being on the offense of seeing signs that something is occurring, however minor, and being proactive in getting to that individual and getting them what they need.
Beautiful. Totally makes sense. And this is a perfect way to kind of close it and wrap it in, because there was a question. And this is really about forward facing, next 3 to 6 months or future in general. But as we can imagine, very quickly with AI and all the technology, we're going to have mountains of data, and we're actually going to be able to connect these patterns. And then it comes into the surveillance state, the minority report type of thing of like, do you arrest somebody or stop somebody because you're 90+% convinced bad things are going to happen? How do you control that, man?
So you are only going to be notified through AI. The AI may be able to connect the dots, but it is going to take a human being to actually interact with that person. So you might get an alert that somebody's hitting all these different red flags, right? AI is not going to be able to do that conversation, right? AI, so you're going to, and AI is not going to be able to necessarily, from what I see, off-ramp that individual in an effective way. We still crave, we are social animals. We still crave social interaction. We still crave that sense of value and everything else for us. That, I feel like, again, being efficient versus being effective, I think the only effective way at this point in time to really stop these types of attacks and stop this sort of, destructive behavior and everything else, is through that human to human interaction. So great, the tech tells me, hey, there's somebody who is checking off a lot of boxes. All the signs are leading to bad things. I'm going to go and take the initiative, and I'm going to go and actually have a conversation with that person.
And then, so I hear real quick that I'm hearing your answer is no, you don't arrest them. You go have a conversation like a human being.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we preach to schools is, suspension is not necessarily the way. We've sort of gone way past it, where Parkland shooter, they suspended him, and he used that time within suspension to basically plan his attack, right? By suspending him, they further isolated him. They had the reinforced message that he doesn't belong here. We don't want you here. What you are saying, what you are doing is not okay. And we're going to do an intervention, and our way of intervention is you need to go away for a little while, without providing any kind of services or resources to help them. So they just felt like that reinforced message of, nobody cares about me. I'm not wanted. They're putting these, they're cutting me off from any kind of social interaction or anything like that. And I'm being deemed like a threat and somebody who doesn't need help. So, I've now gone over that tipping point, and now I'm going to plan out a violent attack. As retribution.
Makes sense. All right, man. I'm going to give you a chance, just a minute or two. What do you concentrate and think about for the future? Next 3 to 6 months, next year, what are you doing with your business? What are you really problems you're trying to solve or excited about working on?
So I'm doing, I have a YouTube page where I post sort of like these 3 to 5 minute sort of specialty kind of little talks. So I encourage everybody to check out TVTP Solutions on YouTube, subscribe to that. Go to our website. You can read a little bit more of the different services that we provide. We have some really bespoke services for awareness training and then technical expertise. So whether or not, you're a town or you're a business or a school, one of the things that I like to say is, like, we can combat this issue with our business card, or we can combat this with our name tag, basically saying, if you just leave it up to sort of these professionals, they're going to stay locked into their system of approach. Where if you expand it, where you're just a human being, you just have a name, you are just a concerned citizen, you're just Mikey from San Diego, right? You're going to get way more effective and more progressive sort of prevention methods if you focus just on sort of the human, rather than just leaving it up to sort of the professional sectors to sort of handle it. For the next sort of 6 months, I'm really trying to just spread the word about prevention, getting people to understand what the actual definition of prevention is, having them figure out, ask the question, are we actually doing something to prevent this, or are we trying to protect ourselves? Again, they have equal value, those things. There is a place for it, but you're probably going to be, everybody wants to sort of be on the front foot. And I think there is an imbalance of how much money is put into sort of the response stuff rather than the prevention stuff. And so it's really just sort of getting the word out. And so I would encourage your audience, to subscribe to my channel, help spread this word to their own networks. And then please contact me, because we can do a bespoke service for you, for your town, school, whatever
Beautiful.
it is, and really try to, because I really do think that as AI, we've kind of talked about it, as AI becomes to really ramp up and people's jobs begin to get replaced through AI, and the decision making and everything else gets replaced, you're going to have a mass identity crisis.
Yep.
And that, if you don't, that void, that sort of is going to get filled by something.
Yeah.
And we want to try and create something that fills that void with some positive stuff, rather than, you know, the anger and the hatred and getting revenge and everything else, and moving people really to a very dark place that is going to, you know, potentially slide out of control.
Yeah, dude, I love it, man. And I'm here to help that good fight. We have tons of content from this podcast. It's been a beautiful conversation. Last question I ask every guest. Someone asked you what it was like to be on the Mikey G podcast experience. What would you say?
Oh, cathartic. It really was, you know, it's having this long form conversation, it and having it not as structured and everything else, is it takes such a weight off. I've been wanting to, you know, preach this stuff for so long and get all this stuff off of my chest. And like you said, I could talk for another 3 or 4 hours about this stuff. So I want to thank you, Mikey, because, you know, not only the positives that I'm going to get from, you know, the business side of things, but just sort of, you know, having this discussion, how you've made me feel. Hopefully people are going to resonate with this message and this story, and will make them feel, you know, a part of something, or make them feel like they have a new sense of purpose or something like that. And, you know, it's people like you that facilitate that is really, really important.
Thanks, man. And say this all the time. When I get responses like that, it gives me chills, because this is exactly what I'm trying to go for. And the fact that you felt that deeply means a lot to me. What is, again, cool, we have about 100 people watching, which I was really interested to see like how many people would come in to this conversation knowing that it's a detour from my brand, in the sense that it's not in the tech Web3 world. What this says to me is our conversation is extremely important, because it's very difficult to hold people's attention for this long.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to do that within the Web3 world, because most people just want to be here to make money. But it shows us that people care about these deep conversations. And I just wrote this, man. I was like, everyone thinks we have a money crisis, but we're about to hit a massive identity crisis.
Yeah.
And the only way we can deal with it is to have conversations like this. The ethos of what we did here is exactly what you're trying to do, right? I love the term paper cuts. And this happens over time. There's just so much nuance to why bad things happen. And the only way you can do that is to understand people and deeply get to know them. Like, we just scratched the surface here, right? We're going to continue to build this relationship, and that deeper understanding is going to make better content. It's going to give us way more different ideas. We'll percolate new ideas that even me and you haven't even thought about. But that comes through really hard work, longevity, and having deep, meaningful conversations. My comments about you, man, is I knew this was going to be a great conversation. But what I got to understand is you as a human being. And you're a beautiful human being. And you said so many really, really cool things. The first thing that struck out and like stood out to me is how, just like you, it took a long time to go through and start connecting the dots, but this sense of self, you found that, and that's where the real change started. This letting go, this concept of letting go. You had all of these little nuances of nuggets that people need to hear, but you said it in your own way, and it was insanely impactful. I know for sure there's no way that we're not going to at least impact one life on this. And I think we're going to start getting people to reach out to you because what you're doing is meaningful. The most powerful thing that, other than the sense of self, is your message about where yes, the prevention stuff is, we need to concentrate on that. But we're so drastically underservicing having the conversations, protection versus prevention, like we said. So the prevention part, right? The conversation part, it's such a miss. It's such a miss, like you said. And thank you for doing what you're doing. It really means deep down inside to me that you're a kind, thoughtful, empathetic human being, and we need more of you. So don't ever stop doing what you're doing. And I'm here as a true, deep friend, especially after going through this conversation, to help you out in any way I possibly can. So much love, brother. So much love.
Thank you so much. And yeah, Mike, I can't thank you enough. And thank you for the kind words, and right back at you for just giving me the platform, introducing me to, all of, your audience and all the hard work that you've done, to cultivate that audience and the trust and everything else. To allow me to be a part of that has been really, really special.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And with that being said, people, we have had the first non-tech Web3 entrepreneur on, and it was one of the most meaningful conversations I've had on this podcast. And I think we're going to be one of the most impactful ones as well, too. So we love you all. Rob and Mikey G are out.